On today's episode, I'm joined by the Manufacturing Millennial, which will mean something for some of you, and maybe for others of you, you'll be a little intrigued on who that is and how they got that name. So we'll answer that question. But what we spent the majority of our time on is talking about trade show strategies and tactics that work extremely well for manufacturing and technology companies. And one of my favorite parts of the discussion is when we talk about strategic partnerships, how you can bring companies into your booth and place your product all over the show floor. Let's do this.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, True Marketing. True is a full-service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit truemarketing.com. And now, on with our podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to another week at Content Marketing Engineered. I'm joined today by Jake Hall, which many of you know as the Manufacturing Millennial. Welcome to the show, Jake.
Hey, Wendy, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm glad I caught you on this calm week because just before we hit record, you were telling me you've been traveling for how many weeks in a row now?
17 weeks in a row now. So it's been, which is a good thing, right? And trade shows are happening, lots of events are happening, and I get to check a lot of them out. So it's a good time.
Yeah, definitely. I know it's both fun, but also sad to miss your family back at home. So I'm happy for you that you have a calm week and honored that you fit us into your schedule. So thanks for being here.
We're gonna have a fun conversation. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, 13, all those weeks of travel, I want to learn from that, and I know our listeners do too. So we're going to talk a lot about trade shows and what you saw in your journeys. But before we do, for those that aren't familiar with you, I thought it'd be fun to just talk a little bit about your career journey because, if you look up Jake Hall on LinkedIn, you see mechanical engineer and sales engineer, and then what? Manufacturing millennial. So tell me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Manufacturing Millennial comes back from a story in 2019 when I was attending a conference around automation robotics. But my career starts much earlier than that. When I was in high school, would have been 2006. I got my first job, which would have been in manufacturing. Worked for a custom automation machine builder that developed automated solutions and systems. And I was a broom boy for them where I swept the floors. I cleaned all the bridge ports and the CNC equipment. I wiped down all of the cutting that went into welding with acetone and got all those ready to roll. And I really enjoyed the aspect of being able to build and see the process of things getting assembled and manufactured. So I went to college. I got a manufacturing engineering degree and a minor in biomedical engineering, which really kind of set me on the path of the world of manufacturing automation to continue. Which after graduating with my engineering degree, I went to go work in sales. So, some people could argue I'm using engineering. Some people could say I'm not. But for me, I've always been a people's person. I loved having conversations and building relationships with people. So working in sales was a great opportunity. I went to go work for an automation distributor where I sold a lot of different products in the industry, from vision systems to collaborative and industrial robots, PLCs, motion control, safety. And that really gave me a good experience because when you're representing so many different product lines and brands, you're working in a lot of different industries. And being raised up here and living in West Michigan, we do have a lot of automotive being in Michigan, but we also had a lot within food and bev and furniture and agriculture and a lot of different industries. So for me, I was able to get my hands and really deep right away by having that experience of understanding all the different processes that work in all these different manufacturing facilities.
When you talk about being an engineer turned salesperson, and you described it as an engineer with people skills, and you see that a lot, right? We know that technical buyers want to have a salesperson that understands what they're trying to do, understands their applications, and can truly help, not just, quote inventory or something like that. So it's actually a wonderful combination. And I could see you doing really well at that. It sounds like it was challenging and fun. So then what happened?
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's all about relationships, right? It's about creating conversations. It's about, being a person that a person's going to call and ask you questions beyond just the product that you sell, but because you can be a resource in the industry. So, continuing that relationships and those relationship building, the pandemic happened in 2020, and as we all know, and so when we were told to work from home, I couldn't go and see people in person. Which is why I turned to being active on LinkedIn. I had a couple hundred connections at the time, but really didn't use it that much for really anything. So I started just posting content on LinkedIn like 5 days a week. Right when the pandemic happened, just I was talking about the products, talking about the industry, kind of making jokes about younger generations with millennials and Gen Zs, and so the idea of the Manufacturing Millennial came out like a year earlier when I was attending a conference, and I was the only millennial of like 400 people there in
The only
manufacturing. Like, what?
one.
Yeah, and so I was like, what the heck is this? So I'll be the Manufacturing Millennial, and that name kind of stuck from there. So that's how this brand started, and really it goes to the value that I put into seeing that social media would be the next impact that we're seeing more in manufacturing automation. It's been in the consumer space for a long time, in the B2C space for a long time. There was a lot of different people, especially on different platforms like Instagram or Twitter or YouTube, but that was much more of a general consumer product. There really wasn't a ton I saw happening in the B2B space, especially in engineering and manufacturing and robotics. There really wasn't a ton of personalized content coming from our industry, at least that I saw. So I figured, well, I'm a millennial. I feel like I have a rough idea of what social media consists of. So I just started creating content that was passionate to what I wanted to talk about, what I thought was interesting. And from there, it kind of just grew a authentic following of content that, I brought to the platform.
I follow you, Jake, and I enjoy when you post. I know you post a lot of video when you're at events,
Mhm.
and I just enjoy that it's very approachable content, and it makes you feel like you were there. And maybe there's a little FOMO, like, oh man, I didn't make it to that show, and look how cool that looks. But I like what you're doing there, and you still, it seems like, have kept up with that same frequency, if not even more.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where while creating content for online space is very important, I think a lot of companies and brands need to realize that in-person events still have a massive critical impact on the opportunity that you can generate.
So, Jake, speaking of trade shows, I don't know if you know this about me, but my first baby job was at a company called National Instruments, or NI, now part of Emerson. And I planned 70 trade shows a year just in
Yeah.
North America. So, if there's anybody that appreciates a good trade show, it's this girl right here. And of course, that was in the late 90s, and before all of the digital stuff, if you
Mhm.
will. However, trade shows have had an enduring life, when it comes to
Yeah.
that marketing mix. So I agree with you. And I think that since the pandemic, the resurgence is clear. People are craving networking, that in-person connection, meeting people that they now know from LinkedIn and other
Mhm.
socials, and just getting to touch and feel and see a brand's products and solutions. So yeah, we've put in the hours, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. We absolutely have. But it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of reward that comes out of it.
Yeah. So let's dig a little bit deeper. So you were recently at Automate, and some of my team members were also there. We just did a recent episode on that. First, what were you doing there? What were you up to?
Yeah, I mean, so Automate for me, we did the Automate Live once again. So we're bringing in a bunch of really cool exhibitors and individuals to tell their story about what's happening in the industrial and automation robotics space. So that was really fun. And then, of course, I love walking the show and just seeing all the new demos and what new products companies are bringing to the industry, and a lot of partnerships that are happening in this space to see what new partnerships are being created from different companies and how they're working together. But for me, it's a great opportunity to see people in the industry. For me, meet people that I've engaged with online, but now I get to meet in person for the first time.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of opportunities.
Great. Okay, so obviously you spend a lot of time on the show floor as well, right? When you weren't
Mhm.
in your own broadcasting booth, if you will. Not to call out any names, but what were some of the, bad things you saw or mistakes that some of the people were making?
Yeah, I think a lot of times the mistakes even happen before the show even starts. And the aspect of people and companies and organizations will go and spend thousands and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to have a booth at trade shows. Yet they don't really do any promotion leading up to the event to showcase to their customers and their partners that they're going to be at the event. And a lot of times, people won't post on their social media or their LinkedIn page until they're at the event, which is just silly in my opinion, because the whole idea of going out there is to have in-person discussions with people. And if people wanted to see your product, how would they know you're going to even be there to schedule it? So for me, I think a lot of lost opportunity is when people are not showcasing leading up to trade shows
Yeah, and
that they're going to be part of
I'll just pile on to that. Some companies, if they do showcase that they're there, they may say, visit us at Automate or something like that, but there's no value proposition. Like there's no, and maybe there's a link that leads you off their website to the show rather than here's what we're going to be showing and what we'll be presenting and specific demos. And here's a link to pre-schedule a meeting. Like,
there.
think of all the extra things you can do. And that's just on your website. And of course there's email and other ways to reach people. So absolutely. Like, how do you extend this investment and make it work for you?
Yeah, and I think the big thing with that is as you mentioned, you need to make the content relatable, but you need to address why visiting them is important. And so I think the biggest thing, like with our industry right now, is hey, a lot of times within manufacturing, you're struggling with either quality, labor issues, inspection. How do you adopt and integrate new technology? What's the approach for that? So if you can go out there and if you're not trying to make strategic um, you know, points on how you can help reduce risk with whatever company that you want to work with or individual you want to work with, they're not going to see a ton of value with what you're trying to do. So a lot of that time is that leads up to content leading up to the show is a massive miss. Now, when you're at the show, I always get a kick, and it's not so much in the bigger booths. I mean, the big companies do trade shows really well, because they're investing a lot of money into it. But like when you go into the outskirts of the big shows and you walk into the 10 by 10 booth areas, or the 10 by 20 side aisles, and you see these companies that are putting $5,000-$10,000 on down for a booth, and then they're sitting in chairs in the back corner, not even engaging with people. It blows my mind. Or
It's the
if you have
worst.
a booth that literally all it is just a 8-foot table with a tablecloth and just some literature laid out. For me, I have a really hard time understanding like how people see that as an engageable opportunity to have conversations. Like you're, I have a really hard time with anyone in the industry saying, "Oh, I can't make my booth interesting because we sell this or we do this."
Oh, come on.
There's
Yes.
there's
What a
so
cop
many
out.
ways. There's so many ways to make your booth exciting. Even if it's not directly related to the product that you're selling or the service that you're providing, your whole goal, number one, is to get people, is to drive attention to what you're doing. And if you don't have attention, regardless of what you're trying to push out, it's not going to matter to begin with. So that's the first thing that I always kick off on is how are you driving engagement to your booth, and that area. So that's some of the issues that I always see is people, one, not engaging with others, having conversations. The other thing that I constantly just scratch my head on is lack of partnerships within booths. Like,
Mhm.
people always go out and say, how come I can't get enough engagement? You're telling me that there's no one who is exhibiting at the show besides you that you don't engage or work with or create partnerships with. That's the other thing too. So lack of partnerships, and I saw a lot of that this year at Automate. That they did really well was they had it was like, for example, Universal Robots. I'll just use that as an example. While they had Universal Robots in their booth, they weren't just highlighting their own product. They had like 7 or 8 other partners and integrators and suppliers within their booth that was showcasing how all the different ways in which their products are being used for industry solutions. Like that for me is a win because you're actually applying how your product is being serviced as. And so that kind of leads into what some of the good stuff, these companies are doing at trade shows.
Yeah, well, I love that, like you said, you're showing your product in an application, and not only that, but you're also, from just a marketer's perspective, saving some money, right?
Yeah.
Oftentimes you can charge for those companies to be in your booth if that's appropriate. And then you're getting in front of their communities as well as your own. So you're
Yes.
driving even more traffic to the booth. So it's this win, 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 or 1 + 2 equals, 5,000 when you do that. So that's a great strategy. I'm glad you brought that up.
Those partnerships create so much good opportunity.
Yeah. I'll tell you another one. You mentioned the lit, and the people who got to sit and just wait. So some of the tricks that we used to do back when I was in the trade show hot seat was we would not order chairs. And so
Yeah.
we would try to just prevent that. But the lit, I mean, I can't even tell you how many pallets of brochures we would not only ship, but then either trash or ship home,
Yeah.
ship back to corporate and spend all this money. And, there's no excuse really with QR codes these days and everybody being so digital. QR codes actually existed back in the 90s, but no one had the phones, the way to scan them. There wasn't a good mechanism for that. But now I don't understand why you have lit at a show.
Whenever I go to shows, people are like, hey, let me hand you this brochure. I'm like, I'm not going to carry it. It's going to get lost in the hotel. I'm not flying back with anything. I'll just take a picture of it. So being able to, like for me, scanning barcodes or being able to have direct downloadable information, I think is crucial. I mean, I've seen more people who literally had the little NFC or RFID chips where they just walk right up to what they're interested on, and then it would just download it right to their phone. And then from them,
Beautiful.
that's a
Oh, I
great
love that.
opportunity for the vendor to track the lead as well, right from there too. So like
Yeah.
it's a smarter way to do marketing and materials at trade shows.
Yeah. One of my favorite things too, and I bet you saw a lot of this because Automate lends itself so well to this, but is having demos that are visually appealing and engaging, or maybe even have a game that's tied into it, but it's still a demo of the product. So
Yeah.
rather than having I have this cool Chotsky and you're going to line up for that, having something that's truly part of the message, part of the solution. So what were some great things like that you saw on the floor?
Oh man, there was there was quite a few in the areas. The thing that I would say attracted me the most to a lot of the show floor would have been I guess two things. One, when I'm walking the show floor, the first thing that I always look for is what is something interactive that I can do or watch or engage with. For me, is is it hands on? Can I program something? Can I change something? And for me, is it something that I can record where people would want to share? So for me, it's all about attractiveness. The next thing that I want to know is it something that is actually feasible to integrate right now, or is it just a demo? Because sometimes there's companies out there. There's one company there that had a bunch of collaborative robots that they were showcasing, and they had 8 of them in the area just dancing. Which was cool, but is it showy or is it actual application? And I know,
Right. Is it applicable to my situation in my industry? How do I help someone make that connection where they're not having to do so much work to figure out if this is a feasible solution, right?
and so like the thing, and I all know there's different points of companies within trade shows where they're just, they're trying to make a name for themselves, but then they're also trying to say, hey, we're actually serious about what we're doing.
Yeah.
So the companies that do really well at trade shows are actually showcasing more case studies of how their product or services was actually used and actually integrated versus a hypothetical, hey, this is how it could be used, but we actually don't have any use cases of how it's,
Yeah.
being used in that area. And I know that's really broad.
No, it's really
But
not. That resonates with me. And I think that maybe somebody listening might be like, oh, but we don't have that application yet, but we want that application.
yeah,
And, the advice I give to them is you can do that with graphics too, to show, if you're a technology company that's kind of horizontal and you play in a lot of verticals, and this is less about automate, but more just in general, you can do that with graphics to show, oh, we work in, food and bev, or we work
yes.
in plant manufacturing or whatever it is, and show that graphically.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the whole thing. You need to be able to make sure that you're relatable, because a
Yeah.
lot of times when people are walking, they're looking for keywords. And if they don't see what those keywords are, they're going to say, oh, that doesn't make sense for me. What I look at, especially like in the automation and the manufacturing space, right? There's manufacturing. While it's specific, it's a very broad, because there's thousands of different manufacturing industries or segments that exist, and you got to target your audience. And part of that, I think, has to do with it's up to the company to do research ahead of time to know who the audience is going to be there, right? If you're going to a show like Automate, it's different than IMTS. It's different than Modex. It's different than Pack Expo. So
Yeah.
you need to make sure that you can't just use the same pre-made booth design and materials to and think you're gonna do well at every show, right? Because the packaging industry at Pack Expo is a completely different segment than, let's say, Modex, which is logistics and transportation, which is completely different than Automate, which is very heavy automation, robotics integration with all the different solution partners
Yeah.
that provide
Yeah.
into that. So that's the big thing for me that as well that I want to say is you can't have a one booth fits all scenario in a lot
Yeah.
of cases either.
Even though it would save a lot of money,
Yeah,
it's really not, because you're not making as big of an impact. So,
yeah,
yeah,
and honestly, signage in the grand scheme of things is not that expensive
yeah, no
to
kidding.
reprint. It really isn't. Or
Very good.
invest in a couple TVs and change up your content digitally.
There
You
you
know,
go. Yeah.
and that's the whole thing as well. There's really, in my opinion, not an excuse to not be customized per trade show, and unless it's just time. I think that's the biggest enemy, especially for a lot of companies who don't have 10, 15 people on their marketing team. It might be a single individual or two, but there's also a lot of great, really low cost resources out there to make content as well.
Right. I on the booth graphics. One more that I'll add, because we've been through this. Making sure that if you're using stock imagery, it's appropriate. Like, there's somebody who knows this industry, can look and say, okay, yes, that fighter jet is appropriate to
Yeah.
this mil aero show. And so that's the issue with a Fiverr or something like that, is making some broad assumptions rather than really having somebody check for technical accuracy, even on imagery. And of course, with all the AI imagery, it's getting even more, the stakes are even higher on that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, that's a great point to have as well when it comes to selecting that content.
Yeah. How about post show calls to action, follow up? Any advice there? Any best practices that you've seen that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I want to say is if you do invest in a booth and you're not capturing good video of the booth, it's silly in my opinion, because you have a great backdrop. A lot of times you might have some great demos, or especially if you're a manufacturer, you have physical products. You're probably not going to have a better backdrop unless you have a dedicated showroom already, to film and create and have your subject matter experts talk about all these different products. And honestly, recording with a phone and a couple of cheap lav mics these days are super easy. It's low cost. and there's really not a lot of excuses anymore. So if you as an organization, in my opinion, aren't recording 10 to 15 pieces of content from the show that you can then post and segment and schedule out throughout the rest of the year, and then even use that content for leading up to the next show, that's a massively missed opportunity. So it's, while you're at the show, you should be figuring out, how do I produce content post show?
Yeah, it should be part of your show planning document and process. Yeah, love that.
is one of those things. And then also the other area as well is, if you're going to a show, more than likely you have partners, and more than likely you have customers that are already walking that show. So if you're not using it as an opportunity to get a 90-second testimonial or a 2-minute conversation around a partnership, with your company as a backdrop name, that's the other thing too, is that area. And so for me, there's so many missed opportunities when it comes to, even you going into other people's booths that you might have a partnership with, and pulling over that subject matter expert and having that conversation. Another massively missed opportunity that you should be doing while at the show for post-show content.
Yes. Okay. So to review, so your subject matter experts, your customers that are at the show, if you have partners that are participating with you, either in your booth or somewhere else, those are other great interviews to have. So yeah, just think of all that video content out of one show. One week.
And honestly, at the end of the day, for if you're a marketer and you're battling for budget, you can then go out and saying, hey, it's not just the show. This show is also going to allow us to produce 20 more pieces of content, with these 5 customers, these 3 partners, and that's a way to, a lot of times, get that budget or that money that you're looking for, or maybe that additional backdrop or demo that you wanted to do. And when you can create those more things. And then the big thing is, then you have real time, you have analytics and data to go back and say, hey, this is what we recorded. Here's the video. Here's the stuff that we got from it. And then that's just additional content that you can then push down the road for using as a tool to get hopefully more funding, more, support when it comes to that area.
Love it. So trade shows, they're really just more content marketing at the end of the day. Yeah. On follow-ups, one of the things that we've seen be extremely successful is scheduling a live webinar that's very relevant to the audience, that's scheduled maybe 6 weeks after the show ends, something like that. So that's a great call to action. Anything else you've seen on those post-show emails, follow-ups?
Yeah, for me, I think it's always really good to be. Oh, the other thing is, if you aren't reaching out to the show directly and trying to figure out who runs their social media pages to like, comment, and reshare, that's another big thing, I think, as well, because a lot of those shows are trying to figure out how to get their content out there more. And it just goes back to that partnership. So right with the show itself is key. But I think the other thing as well is, post-show emails, which is, you can use then that content that you can embed of that video that recorded. So it's saying, hey, here's a 90-second conversation that we had with company XYZ while at the show. And so there's that. The other thing that I would add to that as well is, while it's good to be pushing content on the main page, it's also really important to focus on the content on all the individual pages that your company is there. So if you, as a marketing person, are not putting content on your own page and not encouraging all the subject matter experts that are then at that booth talking to be pushing content on their page, that's something else that you should evaluate to see the value you can get from that.
And when you say their page, you mean their social media pages, right?
Their own individual LinkedIn page, not just the main company page.
Before, during, and after.
Yes. Yeah.
So Jake, I guess to wrap up our talk on trade shows here, for someone who is gearing up for fall trade shows, they still have a few months. Any other parting advice for them?
Find out what networking events are happening and figure out as a part of that, because networking events, I would say, are just as valuable as the trade show themselves. So being a part of networking events, of course, scheduling dinners with the guests that are going to be there, I think is a huge opportunity. You're not going to have as dense of a group of people and potential partners or clients in one city at one time than that are going to happen at trade shows. The other thing that I would strongly encourage is find out ways, if you are, depending on what your product is, if it's a physical product or it's software, figure out ahead of time, if you have other partners who are going to be there at that show, how you can get your product in their booth. So leading up to the fall thing, let's say you are a customer that provides a software service or a solution for a manufacturing floor. Great. Are there other partners that leverage your software, that use your software, that integrate your software, that are also going to be there, and figure out how you can get that product in their booth as well? So all of a sudden, you're not at the show with just your product in your booth. You're at the show with your product in your booth and 9 other, booths as well. And I think that's the big thing where you see success and repetition, because if a person's walking the show and they see your product here, and then all of a sudden they're on the other side of the show and they see your product again, they're like, holy cow, then it's just that reminding
They're
repetition
everywhere.
of what
They
you're
must be an industry leader. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I've done this strategy in the past where we've tried, like, okay, if you go get a stamp, like a passport, right? Go get a stamp wherever you see our demo, times 9 booths, whatever, you get a special gift. And what I found is the complete on that is very low. People don't really want to gamify their visit to the trade show floor.
Mhm.
It's more about, like you said, that greater recognition of, wow, they're everywhere, what it does for your brand. So
100%.
I would say don't bother with that. Like, spend more time on the strategic stuff than trying to turn it into a let's get a stamp game.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I want to, and we just have a couple minutes here, but I wanted to let you know. So I caught you back, gosh, Jake, when was ECIA? October of 2023?
Yes.
I want to say,
In
yeah. And
Chicago.
so you spoke at an Electronic Components Association event.
Yep.
And there was something you said that really stuck with me, that I wanted to just, one, compliment you on how you position this and just get you to share your take on this.
Okay.
But you talked about how STEM is perceived as like sexy and cool, and like new grads want to go in technology, and it's so cool, it's awesome at STEM. And we train, young kids at even elementary school age. We put them in a robotics camp, and it's all about STEM. And anyway, and then you have manufacturing, and it seems so boring and maybe even dirty and low tech. And you were challenging people or brands, manufacturing companies, to recast their brand as a cool STEM company. So tell me about, I guess, how'd you come up with this idea? Because I really like that concept, and just maybe expand on that a little bit more.
Well, I think, for manufacturing as an industry as a whole, it's still perceived very much as this dark, dirty, dull, dangerous, dumb industry. It's where our parents, worked, or our grandparents used to work, and those jobs, quote unquote, left and went overseas and never came back. Or it's just all this old technology that doesn't exist anymore. And when you look at new generations of millennials and Gen Zs, you see that they're very tech savvy. They like data, they like information, they like interacting with digital solutions. And in my opinion, manufacturing leads that area. They have a ton of that. And so if you as an industry are not, or you as a company are not showcasing how technology is transforming your industry and how it's making jobs better and tasks easier to perform, and creating a larger impact on society and sustainability, then you're really missing the change in the perception of what our industry is and how it can be much more of a STEM related opportunity for next gen. So I mean, we need to do a better job of changing the perception of manufacturing and technology innovation. All the new tools that are out there and solutions is what's going to do that.
Yeah, and it's highly technical and cutting edge. And I just, as a marketer, I get excited about the idea of showcasing that and turning some of these legacy brands around, and helping them to be perceived differently.
Yeah.
So that's kind of part of the founding of True Marketing, was observing that these partner companies, two National Instruments system integration companies that had horrific websites and didn't showcase. I mean, you want to talk about the technical acumen of an engineer, go into a system integration company and see all the things that they do and the talent they have on their teams. So I love that. I think it's a great concept that really any manufacturing company can embrace and build upon. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, great. Well, Jake, how can people connect with you and learn more about everything you're doing?
Yeah, I would say, one is follow me on LinkedIn. I have Jake Hall, which you can follow my main page, and of course the Manufacturing Millennial, which is my other page. But if you want more information, you also can check out my website, themanufacturingmillennial.com. And we'd love to have conversations with you. I'm at a lot of shows, so if you see a person walking around with a blue Cubs hat, that's probably me.
All right. And your favorite barbecue when you're in Austin?
Yeah, I loved Franklin's barbecue. That was amazing.
Still Franklin's. You went by
Frank,
Black's last time you were around, right?
I
You're still
even have
still the
here we
Franklin's
go.
guy. Oh,
Franklin,
there it
I
is.
got I
Yes,
gotta
it's
hang
the
it. I
sticker
gotta hang it
and
up still. But
everything.
there's Franklin's barbecue right there. So it was good.
All right, good deal. Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.